Saturday, October 4th, 2025, began like any other in Brighton Park, Chicago. Families outside, autumn sun, a sense of normalcy. But that peace was shattered by a federal law enforcement operation gone wrong. In moments, Marimar Martinez, 30, and Anthony Ian Santos Ruiz, 21, would be caught in a violent confrontation with U.S. Border Patrol. A gun was fired, and the community was left in shock. This was the climax of weeks of aggressive federal immigration enforcement that had put the city on edge. The incident involved a chase, a collision, and a shooting that left Martinez wounded. Conflicting stories quickly emerged: law enforcement's version versus eyewitness accounts. The shooting sparked a multi-hour standoff as nearly 100 protesters gathered, demanding answers and accountability. Federal agents responded with tear gas and pepper balls, escalating the conflict and deepening community wounds. This is the story of how one afternoon shattered a neighborhood's peace and exposed the raw nerves of a city on edge. What happened in Brighton Park would become a symbol of a much larger national conflict. According to federal documents, the chaos began with a chase. U.S. Customs and Border Protection agents in unmarked vehicles were allegedly pursued by a convoy of civilian cars, including those driven by Martinez and Ruiz. The complaint claims the convoy was aggressive, weaving through traffic and ignoring stop signs, creating a dangerous situation. Agents reported feeling threatened, painting Martinez and Ruiz as the aggressors. But this is only one side of the story. In a neighborhood wary of federal presence, some residents saw the convoy as a community watch, monitoring agents they believed were unfairly targeting their neighbors. Operation Midway Blitz had already heightened fear and suspicion in Brighton Park. Residents and activists had been organizing to document federal activity, trying to protect their community. While the federal complaint describes a hostile pursuit, many locals saw it as an act of accountability. The chase was the collision point of two opposing forces: federal agents and a vigilant community. It set the stage for the violent confrontation that followed. The chase ended near 39th and Kedzie, where civilian vehicles boxed in the agent's car, escalating the situation. Federal accounts say Martinez sideswiped an agent's vehicle, while Ruiz struck it from behind. Agents exited their car, now face-to-face with the drivers. In the chaos, the complaint alleges Martinez drove toward an agent, prompting him to fire 5 shots at her vehicle. The sound of gunfire shattered the tense standoff, igniting outrage across the city. Initial DHS statements claimed Martinez was armed, shaping public perception. But the official complaint made no mention of a weapon, raising doubts about the government's narrative. This discrepancy fueled skepticism and anger in the community. The shooting was not just a split-second decision. It was the result of weeks of tension and mistrust. The truth of what happened in those moments remains hotly contested. What's clear is that the violence marked a turning point for Brighton Park. The aftermath would be just as explosive as the confrontation itself. After being shot, Martinez fled the scene, wounded and in shock, before being found at a nearby repair shop and taken to the hospital. Upon discharge, she was immediately taken into FBI custody, her status shifting from victim to detainee. Ruiz was arrested shortly after at a nearby gas station. Both faced serious federal charges, accused of assaulting and impeding officers. The government's case relied heavily on the agent's narrative of being boxed in and attacked. The missing gun, mentioned in early reports but absent from the complaint, became a focal point of public doubt. The community questioned whether Martinez and Ruiz were dangerous criminals or targeted activists. Their families began a legal battle, fighting for their release and for the truth to come out. The incident left Brighton Park with more questions than answers. Why did the official story change? Was this justice, or an attempt to silence those who challenged federal authority? As Martinez sat in custody, the neighborhood's anger and mistrust only grew. The legal and emotional fallout was just beginning. The shooting was only the start of Brighton Park's ordeal. As word spread, nearly 100 residents and activists gathered, demanding answers and accountability. Their protest was met with force. Federal agents in tactical gear formed a perimeter, deploying tear gas and pepper balls. Chemical agents filled the air, affecting not just protesters but families and children nearby. The scene resembled a war zone, with residents caught between law enforcement and chaos. Many described the use of tear gas as a massive overreaction to a peaceful protest. The aggressive response sent a chilling message: dissent would be met with overwhelming force. For Brighton Park, the fear was no longer just about immigration raids, it was about being silenced in their own streets. The trust between the community and law enforcement, already fragile, was shattered that night. Residents felt under siege, their neighborhood transformed into a battleground. The events of that evening deepened the wounds left by the shooting. The sense of safety in Brighton Park was gone. In the days after, Brighton Park was gripped by fear and anger. Parents kept children indoors, wary of unmarked cars and federal agents. Immigrant families felt targeted, believing the entire community was under suspicion. Local leaders, like Alderwoman Julia Ramirez, condemned the federal response as an escalation, not protection. Residents felt powerless. Federal agents answered to Washington, not Chicago, leaving no clear path for accountability. The lack of oversight fueled frustration and deepened the divide. The operation cast a shadow over the neighborhood, branding it as criminal in the eyes of outsiders. Community voices pushed back, insisting they were not criminals but people seeking safety and dignity. The narrative was no longer controlled by press releases. It was shaped by the lived experience of fear and resilience. The trauma lingered, and the desire for justice grew stronger. Brighton Park demanded to be heard. The Brighton Park incident quickly became a political flashpoint. President Trump responded by deploying 300 National Guard troops to Illinois, bypassing local authorities. Governor J.B. Pritzker condemned the move as political theater, accusing the administration of escalating tensions for its own gain. Pritzker pointed to a lack of transparency and drew parallels to a recent fatal ICE shooting in Franklin Park, where the official narrative later unraveled. The clash exposed deeper ifs: federal power versus state resistance, law enforcement versus community trust. For Brighton Park, the political battle only heightened their sense of being caught in the crossfire. The safety and well-being of residents seemed secondary to the struggle between Springfield and Washington. The community's trauma became a symbol in a much larger fight over power and accountability. The stakes had never felt higher. The shooting was part of Operation Midway Blitz, a sweeping federal immigration crackdown in Chicago. Hundreds of agents flooded the city, often operating in unmarked vehicles and without local coordination. The operation was seen as punishment for Chicago's sanctuary policies, escalating a long-running conflict with the Trump administration. The fatal shooting of Silverio Villegas Gonzalez weeks earlier had already set the community on edge, fueling mistrust of federal authorities. Activists responded with increased monitoring and protests, leading to more confrontations. The cycle of raids, surveillance, and violence pushed the city to a breaking point. Federal responses to protests were harsh, further polarizing the situation. By October 4th, Chicago was a city on the brink, neighborhoods turned into battlegrounds, fear and anger simmering. Operation Midway Blitz made violent confrontation almost inevitable. The events in Brighton Park were the tragic result of this mounting tension. October 4th left deep scars on Brighton Park. The violence and show of force undid years of community building, shattering residents' sense of security. The incident confirmed many residents' fears. They were seen as suspects, not citizens. Trust in law enforcement was severely damaged, making cooperation and safety harder to achieve. For Martinez and Ruiz, the consequences were both physical and legal. their futures uncertain. Their case became a symbol of the larger struggle over immigration enforcement and federal power. Beyond politics, they were two lives forever changed by a single afternoon. The story of Brighton Park is a cautionary tale about the cost of aggressive enforcement and broken trust. Healing will require more than time. It demands accountability, transparency, and a new approach to policing. The scars of that day remain, a reminder of the urgent need for justice and empathy. Brighton Park's story is a call for dignity and protection for every community.